Greetings brothers, welcome to a slightly different tactics video this week. Today we're going to be talking about MVPs, or the strongest parts of my army from the tournament that I was just at. And I did lead the Blood Angels to 4-1 finish, and I'm kind of kicking myself that it didn't go 5-0. But there's always next time, so stick around, let's talk MVPs, and hopefully you'll learn quite a lot. If we're just meeting, I'm John, the Blood Angels Commander, and every week on this channel we put out various videos designed to help you be a better Blood Angels player, and probably also a more competitive Warhammer 40k player in general. If that's something you're interested in, please consider subscribing. So I do want to talk about all the different battles, and my army, and my strategies, and how we beat a bunch of very meta lists. So that's going to be what I'm working on this week, but for now, I'm just going to talk about some MVPs and some things that I really liked and just clicked really well in my army list. So the first unit that got me a lot of value in every game is my unit of 3 Bolter Inceptors. And I want to talk about a little bit about Bolter Inceptors because it's actually someone from our Discord, Reziel, that made me open my eyes to them. Before, in most of my games, I was running a 5-man Death Company with chainswords, and while that is a fine option, and you know, when the Death Company do get in turn 2 or even in turn 3, they have a lot of chainsword attacks. The difference though is there is very, very little risk with the Bolter Inceptors. They are 5 points cheaper than that 5-man Death Company. You essentially lose a wound and a 6+ shrug, but you gain a toughness. So I think in terms of raw survivability, there's nothing in it. They're basically the same. If anything, maybe the Gravis are a little bit better because they obviously are able to be a bit more impervious to small arms fire. Now, the reason that I got great value out of the Inceptors, and just the Bolter Inceptors, I don't run the Plasma ones. The Plasma ones are very expensive at 60 points per model. Your Bolter ones are 40 points per model. And there's 2 stratagems that are brilliant with them. One is obviously Descent of the Angels, which basically means that when they arrive, you're going to get to add 1 to their hit roll. So you're getting 18 strength 5 bolter shots. If they arrive in turn 2, they're at -2, and you're going to be hitting on 2s. So I think when I used this stratagem, and I did use it a couple of times, I ended up with about 16 hits, I think, on average. So 16 bolter shots, strength 5, -2, and against toughness 3 armies. And I did play quite a lot of toughness 3 enemies. I played 2 games against Drukhari. I played a game against Harlequins. He had a lot of jet bikes, so jet bikes are T4, and also played against Admech. So quite a few different armies there that are going to be pretty weak against these Bolter Inceptors. And the other nice thing as well is the Descent of the Angel stratagem means that there's no negative charge modifiers when you go to make your charge afterwards. So you'll always manage to make your charge on an 8. So if those bolters don't do enough damage and you feel like you just need to do a tiny little bit more, then Descent of the Angels is going to give you double benefit. And if you make it in, then Descent of the Angels is going to continue, and you're going to get +1 to your attacks in melee combat as well. So a 1 CP stratagem used with a small unit of Bolter Inceptors is kind of amazing. However, there is one other thing you can also do with these Bolter Inceptors, and that is uncompromising fire. And I used this, I think, at least once, and I've been using it a lot on my games on live stream as well. And what it means is when your Bolter Inceptors arrive from Deep Strike, they can also perform an action and still shoot. So, another thing to say is it's very easy to bring these Bolter Inceptors in within range of either a Captain or a Dreadnought with Wisdom of the Ancient to give them maybe reroll 1s on hits, so they can hit very reliably, and they can also use uncompromising fire to perform something like Octarius Data in the turn they arrive and still shoot their weapons. And these guys really, for me, they were one of my MVPs. I really rate Bolter Inceptors now. I have thrown the 5-man Death Company away. Bolter Inceptors are just what I like to run, and if you don't have any, then I would say try them out. I know a lot of people love the Plasma Inceptors, but Plasma Inceptors, I guess, fill a different role to these guys. For these guys, for me, they're coming in, they're guaranteeing their 18 shots, they're killing chaff units, they're killing infantry on objectives. They're giving me a little bit more clear if I need to open up an area of the map to make some solid charges. And then finally, they are also performing an action. And the last thing to mention is they are also a core jump pack unit. So we can redeploy them with Upon Wings of Fire for 1 CP to bring them off the board and bring them back in a following turn. And again, that opens up really easy scoring for data and retrieve Octarius data. So that's something to just consider. Bolter Inceptors, I really love them and I rate them very, very highly. So the next unit that I got insane value out of was my Librarian with the jump pack, upgraded to the Chief Librarian, and he has also been given the Warlord trait Psychic Mastery, which gives him +1 to all the psychic tests. He casts 2, he denies 2. So I found this guy very, very, very useful, and in pretty much every game he provided value. The powers that I take are Psychic Fortress, so I'm going to put most of my army, I'm going to deploy it, most of it within 6 inches of him, so in turn 1 and potentially turn 2 he's going to raise the fortress and protect everything with that 5 up invulnerable save. I also found myself taking Might of Heroes. Some people prefer Veil of Time because it makes, you know, easier to get into combat, reroll charges. Might of Heroes for me, again, provided a lot of value. I'm going to make one of my Dreadnoughts toughness 8, and with my toughness 8 Dreadnought, he's also going to get an additional attack. Additional strength doesn't really matter much on a Blood Angel's Dreadnought who's already strength 14 with +1 to wound. But the toughness and the invulnerable save really, really helped out. You know, like I fought 2 games against Drukhari, so we're making their Dark Lances, and they did have a lot of Dark Lances. Wound on 4s rather than 3s, you know, 16% more survivability just from that. And then obviously the Psychic Fortress providing another 33% more survivability, because normally a Redemptor wouldn't get any save against Drukhari Dark Lance, right? So you're basically, the 2 powers he's bringing there are making my Redemptors 50% more survivable if you put them together, and they really did. He was, without a doubt, very, very core part of the list, and in most games he only died if I chose to sacrifice him, and I think I did use Angel Sacrifice, which I also think is a great stratagem you can use to protect key units. So you can Angel Sacrifice with a character. He is, once he's raised his Psychic Fortress 2 turns, and once he's Might of Heroes the Dreadnought, or even another character a couple of turns, he's kind of done his job. If he kills anything, it's a bonus. And in one of the games, we actually got insane value out of Null Zone, so that is the 3rd power I take. With the Psychic Mastery trait, then you're casting Might of Heroes and Psychic Fortress on a 5, and you're casting Null Zone on a 6. And if you use rerolls here, you have a very, very high probability chance of making these rolls. So if you're desperate to get one of these psychic powers off with the rerolls, then if you're casting on a 5 with a reroll, that's a 97% chance to pass. And if you're casting on a 6 with a reroll, it's a 92% chance to pass. So, Psychic Mastery, making him very, very reliable. And also, I mean, he's okay in combat. He does have a D3 Force Sword, which is going to be -3 or -4 later on in the game. But I found this Librarian one of the most important parts of my list. And, you know, on paper, in the early game, he kills nothing. He's just there as a very, very important support character. And I think the threat of Null Zone alone can also be quite intimidating. Because if the enemy know that you have Null Zone and you have the Psyker that can move 12 with a D6 +1 advance, so basically a minimum of about 20-inch threat range for removing invulnerable saves, I generally really like this character. And I think he is a core part of a good Blood Angels list. For a little while I'd actually dropped him out of my army list, and that was when I went through a period where I was really struggling to find wins. He was in my list when I went 11 wins on a row on the Blood Angels channel a few months ago now, and he was in that tournament list where I really should have gone 5-0. If I'd had a tiny little bit more experience against Dark Eldar and maybe a little bit of luck, I would have ended up 5-0. So, Jump Librarian with Null Zone, with Psychic Fortress, and I guess the 3rd power is up to you, but I really, really, really like Mighty Heroes. So, and before this tournament I was actually humming and hawing. I wasn't sure if Might of Heroes was the right pick, but 2 Harlequin lists full of fusions, and sorry, 1 Harlequin list full of fusions and 2 Drukhari lists full of lances and dark lances. Might of Heroes was 100% the correct call here, and yeah, really liked the Chief Librarian. Also going to have a little shout out to my small 7-man squad of Sanguinary Guard. I only ran 1 squad of them, and in most games I had them sit in obscuring positions for 2 turns. If you've watched any of my live streams, you will know that I sit with my Sanguinary Guard very defensively for 2 turns. They are a lot better once we get into turn 3, and also I think in one of my games I actually twice rolled a Snake Eyes for their charges. So I had 2 charges to make from the Sanguinary Guard, and you know, 1 in turn 3 and 1 in turn 4, and both times I Snake Eyes the charges, but I made it because I sat and moved defensively from obscuring position to obscuring position, so actually when I needed to make a charge roll, I was like 2 or 3 inches away. So I guess this is why maybe I don't always put too much value on Veil of Time, because I'm usually able to do really solid positioning with the Sanguinary Guard, making sure, if you didn't watch my video last week when I talked about the combat phase, you really should, because you can get so much extra movement out of pile-ins and consolidations and heroic interventions and then consolidations. There's so much you can do in the combat phase, especially with the Sanguinary Guard and their 6-inch heroic intervention. I'll link that video up here and you should really watch it, because I used it absolutely to my maximum advantage, and in every game, my Sanguinary Guard just ripped through the enemy. Even the game I lost, I was at a point actually in that game where I was pretty sure in the next couple of turns the opponent was going to be tabled. I just didn't manage to swing the game in time. So, yes, the Sanguinary Guard, they're a great unit. I still don't think they're 32 points per model. I know they recently went up in point costs. I don't think they're survivable enough for 32 points per model. When I was playing against Drukhari, quite often they were hitting me with weapons that were either -3, -4, and I think some of their weapons were even -6. When the guy said to me, like, those ones are at -6 on the dice, I'm like, what is this, -6? So I think that they would benefit a lot from an invulnerable save, maybe within their 32 points. Obviously, you can use the Psyker to give them an invulnerable save with good positioning, and I did do that a couple of times throughout the game, or the games. But the Sanguinary Guard, comboed with the Warlord or comboed with Chapter Master rerolls, generally always did the damage I needed them to do. Even though maybe we're only wounding on 4s against some enemies, and just overwhelming number of attacks. You know, 7 guys, usually they're able to hit on 2s, rerolling 1s, and then the 2 damage from all the swords and axes. I didn't actually play any enemies like Death Guard or Custodes that had high toughness, so in some cases I would have been better running all swords here, because the swords would have punched the enemies onto like no save or only saving on a 6 a bit easier than the axes did. But regardless, Sanguinary Guard, they're a great unit. I can understand why some people run multiple of them in their army list. If they make charges, they pretty much kill what they charge, and yeah, the ability to upon wings of fire them means even if they're in a difficult situation, you don't have to fall back, which means you can still score Oath of Moment points effectively. So I want to say that my Sanguinary Guard, although it's just 7 and it's a small squad, we got very good value out of them, and that's even after maybe hiding them for a turn or 2 at the beginning of the battle. And then finally, I think I want to talk a little bit about the Chapter Master on a bike. And in my list, I run a Chapter Master on the bike as the Warlord. He's expensive at 165 points, and he does carry a Thunderhammer and an Infernal Pistol, but he also has Armor Indomitus, giving him that 2+ save and additional wound, so he's on 7 wounds. And Gift of Foresight, so we can reroll 1 hit, 1 wound, 1 save each turn. And also, he's got Artisan of War to give him that 5-up shrug. Now, hopefully over the next few weeks, I'm going to be talking to Jack Harper, who was the Blood Angels player in America that went 7-1 in the US Grand Open in Florida. And I've been looking at his list because obviously I'm going to talk to him, and he runs basically the same character, but the Primaris Chaplain on a bike. So he has the Primaris Chaplain on a bike. He gives him the same armor Indomitus, so he's on the same 2-up save. He also gives him the Adamantium Mantle, so he's got the same 5-up shrug. Obviously, because he's Primaris, he has 1 additional wound. But he also has Gift of Foresight, and he gives his Chaplain Master of Sanctity, Canticle of Hate, and the Mantra of Strength. So the Mantra of Strength obviously able to give him the 3 damage weapon, which I suppose without the -1 to hit, but 1 less strength, because it would buff his Crozius. Canticle of Hate to give 2 inches to charges rather than the +1. And then obviously because he has Litany of Hate, because he is a Chaplain, he can give reroll auras very much like the Chapter Master can give reroll auras. Only where the Chapter Master can do some shooting reroll auras, the Litany of Hate just does melee reroll auras. So it's interesting to see that I've got the Chapter Master at 165 points, providing great value every game with that loadout. And Jack, who arguably did better than me in the tournament, he went 7 for 1, I went 4 for 1. So he did better, and he is running the Primaris Chaplain on a bike, but basically the same Warlord traits, the same relics, the same Artisan of War. So while my character has a little bit more shooting, like I just said, his does a little bit more melee. Now obviously there's a little less reliability on the Chaplain because he isn't the Wise Orator, so he has to cast both litanies on 3s. So I mean the Chapter Master is 25 more points, so they kind of balance out, but it is interesting to see that we're basically running the same character for very similar usages, and I think that's no consequence. It's no coincidence. We both have realised that this is a very, very powerful Blood Angels character that can be built, and Chaplain on a bike, Captain on a bike, it's definitely something worth considering. And I think one of the reasons to definitely consider it is the value that you get out of him with Angel Sacrifice. So with Angel Sacrifice, as we all know, you can force an enemy to put all their attacks into your character. Sometimes you can do this with a sacrificial character. I definitely did it, I think, this weekend with my Librarian. Just sacrificed him against something really nasty to allow both my Sanguinary Guard and my Captain, and maybe even a Dreadnought, to just continue to fight totally unopposed. But against the Admech player with the Titan did manage to move into combat with both the Sanguinary Guard and my Captain. The Titan had a 12-inch move, and I went first, which meant like I had to move up the board a little bit, and I couldn't get a good range from my turn 2 charge. So when he moved in turn 2, he had a decent charge. So I was able to use Angel Sacrifice on my Captain. And then the great thing about Armor Indomitus, and if you're not fully familiar with Armor Indomitus, is it gives you the ability to turn on a 3+ invulnerable save for a single phase. However, you don't need to activate it until you know how many saves you need to make. So unlike a smokescreen or a transhuman where you have to pay the CP essentially before any shots are fired or any dice are rolled, with the Armor Indomitus you wait. So basically, like, the Titan will attack my character, he'll probably be hitting on 2s or something, he'll probably be wounding on 2s. So once I know how many saves I'm taking, and I believe I was taking maybe 4 saves against a flat 6 damage weapon at like -3, so normally I would be on my 4+ invulnerable save, and basically if I fail 2, there's a high likelihood my Captain is dead. I was able to then go, alright, I need to make 4 saves, I will activate Armor Indomitus, I will put my Captain on a 3+ invulnerable save. Because he has Gift of Foresight, I will reroll 1, so I actually just passed 2, and then failed 2, so I was able to reroll 1 into a 3. I think I CP'd the 4th one to try and save that as well, but I failed. So with a really bad roll, my Captain was essentially going to take just flat 6 wounds. Armor Indomitus gives him 7 wounds, so he was going to be able to survive 100%. And then the 6+ shrug, or the 5+ shrug, sorry, from Adamantium Mantle meant that I believe he ended up on 4 wounds, and that was super critical because when I actually fought back and killed his Titan, he was able to pay 2 CP to detonate it. It was a 14-inch explosion, and it was D6 mortals. So my Captain took like another 3 mortals, and he ended up on like 1 wound from the explosion, but it did mean that I think I actually rolled a 5 for the Sanguinary Guard, so we lost 2.5 Sanguinary Guard, which was horrific, but we still won the game very convincingly. But I think if the Titan had put all of his attacks into the Sanguinary Guard, you'd probably be looking at 5 or 6 Sanguinary Guard dead. Then I might have not had enough come back at the Titan to actually kill it. So Angel Sacrifice and that really survivable Chapter Master with basically a 3+ invulnerable save for when you need it, and a 5+ shrug all the time, and 7 wounds is very valuable. And I think the thing I found with Armor Indomitus is you only really need it once per game, right? Like, if the enemy... It's hard for the enemy to commit on the Bite Captain, or in Jack's case, the Primaris Chaplain, because he moves so fast. So you can determine, you know, you can almost determine when the enemy is going to get him. They're not going to be able to shoot him usually because he's being protected by Lookout Sir. So it's just a case of like that one time, and I guess what I would class that as like the oh shit moment. Like they made some long charge or they made a really good attack, and in most normal circumstances, if that was any other character, I think it would, if it was any other Blood Angels character, period, it would probably be dead. But this combination lets you sacrifice and lets you just stay alive, and I believe in previous games, not at this tournament, I've been able to use that against something like Mortarion to make him waste all his attacks. But I guess he was my MVP number 4. You guys know I love the Chapter Master. I go on him about him a lot. Obviously you can do this with a Primaris Chaplain on a bike, and if you haven't tried it, I really recommend you try it and just re-listen to everything I've said, because if you do it correctly, it really provides insane value. So the final thing I want to talk about in this video is Drukhari Raiders and why they're a problem and how you deal with them. Because I had 2 games against Drukhari. I think that both games was 6 Raiders. And Raiders are notoriously good, I think, for their 95 points. The fact that they have an invulnerable save makes opening them up very difficult, and sometimes if you don't open them up, it can cost you a lot of points. In my 5th game, in the game that I lost, I think that I could have probably won. I think I made 2 mistakes, but, well, I think I made 1 mistake, and 1 was bad dice roll, right? I shot my plasma cannon at a raider that was already in low wounds. I just needed to open it up. If I'd opened it up, my Blade Guard charge would kill everything inside the raider, and I take 10 points for secondaries in turn 2. As it was, I took no points, or 5 points for secondaries, and he controlled more than me, so rather than him taking 10 as well, he took 5 more. So essentially this was a 10-point swing, and I lost this game by about 20 points. And I think that one of the reasons that I lost the game was that the raider that was on 1 wound had like, I think it was like 10 Cabal, or maybe it was 5 Cabal and 5 Incubi inside it. But regardless, I would have killed all of those with the Blade Guard veterans, or I would have killed a very good number of them, and I already was pushing on at the end of the game to basically table them. So I think as much as it was just a 10-point swing, I think it was a 10-point swing, I think on turn 2 or something, and you know, he would have lost a lot more stuff. So I had my Redemptor, and I shot it against the Raider, and I rolled a 1 on the Plasma Cannon on high power, and I paid my CP, and I re-rolled into a 1. So I get 1 shot, and obviously I don't open this Raider up, I leave it on 1 wound. Now I have the horrible dilemma of I either leave this Raider with 1 wound, or when I charge it and blow it up with whatever I charge it with, because I'm going to kill 1 wound off it with charge, he's going to spit out 10 OBSEC units onto the objective. I did have some OBSEC units on the board, but not enough to counter, you know, 10 guys spilling out onto the objective. My Blade Guard veteran are only 5s, so this was going to be a big problem. So I guess what I thought about this afterwards was, I guess this is why Relic Contemptors are very, very strong right now and also picked. Because if you think about the Plasma Cannon from the Redemptor, and bear in mind the Redemptor is quite a bit more expensive than the Relic Contemptor in terms of points. If you think about the Plasma Cannon, the problem with the Plasma Cannon, in turn 1 it's -5, and I think this was turn 1 that I was shooting, or if it wasn't turn 1, it was turn 2. It's still -4, but you still got that 5+ invulnerable save. Whereas, and obviously I only got one shot at a very critical moment. I feel like if that, my Redemptors were hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, or hitting on 3s and rerolling everything. So I feel like if I'd rerolled that into 2 maybe, or even a 3, I think. So even if it was like poor reroll, I probably still open up that Raider and I win the game, and I go 5-0. If it had been a Relic Contemptor with the double Volkite cannons, you know, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s or something, you're getting 16 shots. So you're almost guaranteed, on a bad roll, 14 hits. Out of those 14 hits, remember 6s for wounds or mortal wounds, and just the weight of fire you're getting out of those Contemptors is going to be much, much more effective against Drukhari Raiders. If one of my Dreadnoughts had been a Relic Contemptor, I think 100% we open up the Raider and we win the game. So it's a tough one for me, right? Because I obviously run the Librarian, which we talked about earlier, and 2 Redemptors, which if you put it together, it could essentially be replaced with 3 Relic Contemptors. I guess the problem is, against some things, the Redemptors are just going to be better. The Redemptors obviously have melee fists, and I think throughout the 5 games that I played, my Redemptors performed pretty averagely, and I was happy with their firepower in all situations. One bad roll hurt me more than I think it should have, potentially. You know, rerolling a 1 into a 1 with a CP, it's actually just a 3% chance of that happening. And I actually had pretty rough rolls at the beginning of that game, like across the board. It sometimes happens, and then the day after I played John on stream with his Necrons. John hasn't played a game since December, and I made every single roll. The dice gods were really mean to John. I'm making like 10-inch charges left, right, and centre. I don't think I failed anything. I think I did like 3 10-inch charges in a turn and made them all. But anyway, I guess my point is, if you play a lot of Drukhari, Relic Contemptors are going to be very good with the double Volkites. Are they going to be good against everything? No. Against Admech, I believe they're quite weak. Against other Dreadnoughts, they're going to be quite weak. Against anything T7 and above, they're going to be quite weak. But, yeah, it's a really tough decision, guys. Like, Relic Contemptors, Redemptors look cool as well, and they do have a fist that's very Blood Angels themed. I like my Redemptors. I'm finding it very... I've been, after losing that final game, I've been thinking a lot about my list, and I'm going to talk about some changes that I'm going to be making probably on stream. I mean, you kind of, if you watched the game on Monday night, I have already changed some things. So there's a lot to learn. And obviously, I'm always trying to improve my list. I have one more tournament this year, and I think it's maybe in about 8 weeks' time, and it's a solo tournament. So, am I taking a Relic Contemptor to that tournament? Probably not. But I do think there is a lot of value in them. I think to get it to work in my list, I would need to drop the Librarian, and I think I prefer the value of Null Zone over those Contemptors. But I think in that tournament there will be people running 3 Relic Contemptors, and I think at the tournament that we just passed, there was definitely, I think there was a Deathwatch army running 2 Relic Contemptors and 2 Redemptors, and then there was another person, a Spite Scars army, running 2 Relic Contemptors. And yeah, it's the difference between those 2 Dreadnoughts is it's kind of hard to decide. Maybe an ideal solution would be to run 1 of each, but then I guess maybe that's 2 of each seems to be. I think the list that had 2 of each, I think those guys finished second, and I think the list that had the 2 Relic Contemptors and that was his only shooting in that list. I think that actually finished. That was the number 1 team. I did beat the number 1 and 2 teams though. Maybe said that already, but I think it's important because I was very pleased to beat the number 1 team. The guy that I beat on the number 1 team was actually the captain of the Scottish team. So you know, like they go to internationals and stuff. So I was very pleased to give him a run for his money, and I did check with him. That was the only loss he took at the tournament, so I'm very pleased about that. Sorry this video isn't as detailed as it could have been, and sorry that I haven't got the tournament breakdown yet, but my plan over the next week is to work on a proper breakdown of the tournament that I was at, and give a lot of more information on all the battles. So like I said, if you're not subscribed yet and you want to see that, please consider subscribing. And I'm also going to try and interview Jack Harper this week. We talked about Jack's chaplain a few minutes ago, how he went 7 for 1. And so that will give you 2 very different Blood Angels lists, because Jack's list couldn't be more different from mine. His list is 100% melee. Mine is the 50-50 melee shooting list. And yeah, so a lot of exciting stuff to come on the channel. Thanks again for supporting and watching and always being around and being here over the year, I guess, that we've been doing the channel. I hope now that we've had a decent tournament performance, all the people that say I'm terrible at Warhammer and just beat my friends maybe think that I can actually be okay on the table. And yeah, I'm sure I'll see you guys all in the next one. Thanks again for sticking around and watching to the end of the video. It's always very appreciated, guys. I will be live a couple of times this week and we'll catch up. And if you haven't yet joined our Discord, then that is the best place to chat to me. And I will catch you all very soon. By the blood are we made strong. Peace.